This is the free audiobook of Elemental Power. If you haven't heard the previous chapters, you'll find the link to the playlist in the description below. You can start at chapter 1 or just pick up where you left off. Book 1, Shattered. Chapter 12, The Warlord Makes Mistakes. The next morning, I felt as if I had been drugged. An invisible weight pushed me down into the mattress. I tried to open my eyes, but they were so heavy I couldn't find the strength. My mind was fuzzy like I'd partied all night, but I hadn't. I reached over to Glenn. He was gone. Suddenly, the fog over my brain grew stronger. Something like a vice grip squeezed my skull. I could barely think. I felt all over, and he wasn't there. His pillow was cold. Prying my eyes open, I looked around the tent and didn't see him anywhere. Maybe he was outside, talking with Marlowe. Yes, that must be it. I settled back down into the covers, hiding from the chill, my heart thumping madly in my chest. I looked around for clues. A flash of metal caught my gaze. I bolted upright. His clothes and all his weapons lay in a pile on the ground. My blood froze. Panic left me breathless. I tried to scream for Marlowe, but was too paralyzed. My voice came out as a breathy wheeze. A note fell from the ceiling above the bed and landed on my lap. It read, "He has been taken." Sweat broke out on my brow, and fierce stench flooded my nostrils, acrid and stinging. Bile rose up the back of my throat, and black spots swam in my vision. I began dry heaving, clutching the sheets and leaning over the mattress. I didn't think I was crying. I felt too empty to cry, but a tear splashed to the ground, and I thought of Marlowe. I couldn't scream, but I could summon him with tears. I focused on the water sprite and let a few more drops fall to the dust. "Alana, is everything all right?" Marlowe asked from the doorway, his voice strained and full of effort. I couldn't speak, though I tried a few times. I retched and vomited pure bile onto the ground. He rushed into the tent and was at my side in a moment. "Water, tent, water, please." He handed me a cool glass and I washed out my mouth and spat on the floor. My throat was too tight to swallow. I showed him the note the tent had given me. His orange skin drained of all color. If water creatures had blood in their veins, it fell now from his face and left him hollow-eyed and pallid. "I am so sorry, Alana," he said, his voice tight. "I should have been watching more closely. When I woke, I felt strange, cursed, like I couldn't move or think properly." I nodded furiously, trying to indicate that it was the same for me. This was fairy magic, I thought. I clutched his tunic, wadding it up in my trembling fists and pulling him toward me. I could barely force the air out, but I managed to croak, "Can you find him?" He pulled my hands away gently, nodding. "Water," he said. A large silver basin appeared halfway between the bed and the fire. He sat down cross-legged on the dirt, looking down into it. As he put his hands into the basin, they disappeared, going back to their native form, mingling with the water molecules. "Glen Ellenbill, where are you?" I held my breath, clutching the sheets, trying to keep from dying over the desolation I felt. I felt like Glenn was already dead. Why else would they have taken him? "I found him," Marlowe cried, turning intense gray eyes upon me. "You have one clever elf, ma'am. He's been spelling with his urine. 3 words. Fairies. Rune. Come. What a marvelous mind. What should I do?" I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe for the joy of knowing he was not only alive, but reaching out to me. I had to get him back. Fear changed to resolve in an instant. My mind was made up. Now, like Glenn, I had to be clever. His life depended on it. I wished for a cure of whatever was happening to me. Whether drugs or magic, I wasn't sure, but something had been done to me and Marlowe. A small bottle of green cordial appeared in my hand, and I forced it down in one gulp. I felt my throat open up and allow my first real breath since finding him gone. My mind cleared and I could move without difficulty. Gasping and choking, I wished for some pearl wine like I'd had with Silver. It arrived and I gulped it down greedily. I needed intense clarity at the moment. Good thinking. Marlowe requested the same cures and downed them swiftly. All right, time to think. I closed my eyes and let my thoughts race past me, clutching at what made sense and flinging away what didn't. A plan was forming. I just needed a few more seconds. Marlowe, go to each of the watchers and tell them what's happened. Relay any messages to me as quickly as you can. I have Glenn's weapons, not that they'll be much use in my hands, but it's something. I'll pack up now and head toward the Central Lands. Tell Ambius I'm sorry. I know he warned me not to go there, but I have to get my husband back. I have to. I choked, biting off the words. When you've told them, come and find me. I'll be moving quickly. If the Watchers can send help, I'll be glad of it. Try to stay in contact with Glenn, even if you can only see him for an instant. Please come back when you can. Good luck. He didn't nod, didn't speak. He just dissolved into the water in the basin and was gone. I dressed hastily, slung the bow and arrows on my back, put the long sword on my belt and the small knife in my boot. I braided my hair hastily and tied it with a ribbon. They had taken the one thing I loved. There was no one else. I would get him back. I had to. I was now at war. As soon as I stepped out of the tent, it packed itself, not waiting for the usual request to be spoken aloud. I felt the tent's anger too. It was supposed to be our protector, and it took the failure personally. I knelt over it and said, "They'll pay for this." A line of sprawling cursive text scrolled along the roll of the tent like a marquee. Yes, they will. It felt good to have that tiny encouragement. I slung the tent on my back next to the arrows and began walking with the sun in my eyes as fast as I could go toward my love. Anger and terror fueled my steps. I covered twice the usual amount of ground, jogging in bursts. We had traveled at an angle from far south to west. I was walking as the crow flies straight eastward to the Central Lands. The half-frozen rivers, ponds, and streams didn't bother me. I swam right through them. I had traveled what felt like many miles, but I still couldn't see the end of the flatlands. I hadn't had anything to eat or drink since the evening of the previous day except for the cures. I stopped near one of the many creeks bubbling past and drank thirstily. Washing the sweat off my face and wetting my hair, I thought of Marlowe, telling him where I was. Afraid to continue without instruction from the Watchers, I set up the tent and ate a few grapes, but not much, too stricken with worry to eat. I pushed the plate away and looked around, unsure of what to do next. "I'm back, Alana. May I enter?" Marlowe asked through the canvas. "Yes, please." I stood and waited. He entered, went straight to the food, and began eating. I was impatient, pacing with my hands behind my back, glancing over at him every few seconds. "He is alive," he said between bites. "I first went to Silver, who has sent dozens of water sprites to hide and keep a close watch over him. Next, I went to Ambius, who sent wind sprites to him, as well as one to us. He bade me tell you, don't lose heart. I went to Worm after that, and though it took a while through the snow, I found him, and he sent earthworms to listen under the stones. Finally, I discovered a way to contact Rock. He had these crystal cups of water in his palace. It was the only place in the entire Fire Realm that I could travel to. He was there by the cup waiting for me, having been forewarned by Ambius. He is sending a fire sprite to join us." He gulped, took a drink of water, and shook off his apprehension. I glanced at him, wondering how he and a fire sprite would get along. He always shuddered at the thought of fire. He read my look and said, "Anything to see him safely back to us. Anything." I flew at him and hugged him tightly, muttering jumbled thanks. I wasn't alone. A sudden whoosh of wings outside made me release him to leap up and run out of the tent. Blaze was landing. Gable Ellenbill slid off the dragon's back. He was dressed in his usual browns and reds, but his eyes were clear and focused. He had combed his hair, trimmed his beard, and his walk was perfectly straight and purposeful. It was a shock seeing him completely sober. Blaze bowed lower, and another figure slid off his scaly back. It was a fire sprite, but not all aflame like the ones in the Palace of Rock. She was in humanoid form. Her hair was long and straight, but lifted up at the ends and floated in strands as if hovering above a great blast of heat. It was fiery orange and red, much redder than any ginger I'd seen in my world. Her eyes were rich coal-black, with delicate arched brows. Her face was fierce, but friendly. I felt instantly more hopeful. She was dressed in all the colors of a bonfire and bristling with knives. She meant business. Blaze bowed to me and flew away, back toward his sweltering home. "Thank you," I called after him, waving hugely over my head. Gable had stopped a few paces from me and was staring me down. I felt uncomfortable, remembering the last time he'd been so close, and Silver's revelation. I took a step away from him. "We will bring him back," he said, striding forward and grabbing both my shoulders hard. "Do you hear me? We will bring him back." I nodded, thankful. He took my hands and held them for a moment. Then he looked down at them, with his jaw dropped. "You're wearing my mother's ring." "Oh, I didn't know it was hers. Glenn gave it to me on our wedding night." "You're married." His face went pale. "Yes? Why do you sound so shocked?" "It hasn't been that long. But then, it doesn't take that long." "What doesn't take that long?" The pointed tips of his ears went red and his face flushed. He jerked his hands away suddenly and they fell heavily to his sides. "Nothing. Forget it." He moved off to greet Marlowe. The firewoman approached me. She was wrapped warmly in an orange coat with a red cloak on top of that. She appeared to be freezing, but was ignoring the cold as best she could. I felt for her, having been to her part of the world already, aware of how hot it was there and how cold it was here. "I am Peta. Rock bids you success in your rescue. I am a warrior of the southern lands, and my steel is yours," she said. Her voice was deep and sultry, and she had a knockout figure. I was amply endowed, but she had the golden ratio measurements. Her eyes were slanted just a bit, and her nose was slightly upturned. She had full lips and a wide mouth, but she did not smile. She was a goddess of war. Thank God. "Pleased to meet you," I said, shaking her offered hand. "I'm glad to have you with me." "The pleasure is mine," she replied, dropping my hand and drawing her sword. "Let's get the bastards." Her ferocity made me burst out in a fit of hysterical laughter, which led to tremors. Marlowe came to my side, standing like a pillar of support. He was transfixed by Peta, and couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. She could kill him with a spark, and he looked like he wouldn't mind at all, but this was neither the time nor place for romance. "Where is the wind sprite?" I asked Gable. "He'll be here in a moment." He stopped off to speak with Glenn. I sat on the ground with my head in my hands, a pounding headache making my temples throb with every beat of my heart. Marlowe invited everyone into the tent to eat and drink while we waited. I remained outside, alone. It was late afternoon now. No sense in going any further today. The lack of progress was tearing me up inside. I was staring at my lengthening shadow. Every terrible possibility flitted through my brain when a second shadow appeared to my right. I glanced over, but saw nothing. When I turned back to check the shadows on the ground, the new shadow was still there. Someone was beside me. I looked over once more and saw him. It must be the wind sprite. One moment he was thin air. The next he was forming a body as Marlowe had, clothes wrapping around him as his shape hardened. He was pointy like Glenn, but much older, with wispy white hair, an oddly boyish face free of whiskers, wearing hues of white and light blue with many weapons and a roll of fabric on his back. "Glenn sent a message for you," he said, taking my hands. "He said he loves you, and not to be dismayed or distracted from your task." I dissolved into tears. I could hear Glenn speaking those words to me. "How'd he look?" The wind sprite shook his head slowly. "Not good." "Who are you?" "I am Boreas, general of the armies of the eastern lands. I fought with Glenn in the battle against the North more than 10 ages ago. We will get him back, Alana. Have faith." I nodded, but he knew it was just a cursory acceptance. I didn't truly believe it yet. For now, it was all just wishful thinking. My feet were killing me. Pulling off my boots, I noticed that my feet were covered in enormous blisters. Jogging in wet boots hadn't been the best idea. I grimaced, pulling in air through my teeth and poking at the fluid-filled bubbles. Boreas stifled a gasp. I threw my boots as hard as I could, venting anger feebly. "Excuse me," said a deep brown voice to my left. I looked up and saw what was obviously an earth sprite. He was fully formed, wearing shades of brown and gray, bearing a massive spiked mace, a club, and a small axe. Staring up at him, I said, "I wasn't expecting you." "No," he replied, squatting down to see me better. He was easily 7 feet tall. He had a face full of beard, his cheeks were round, and a jagged scar ran down the left side. His eyes were light brown like sandy clay, crowned with bushy black eyebrows. His skin was milk chocolate, with a countenance that was jolly but ravaged by war. "I am Terran. I volunteered. I have given my life to war, and it has taken that payment with interest. If the eon of war is to end, you must finish the quest. I will make sure that it is done." I felt so loved by these strangers, and they were strange indeed. Boreas pulled the roll off his back and showed it to me. It was a tent that looked just like mine. "Is it magic?" I asked. "Yes, it volunteered as well. It thought you might not like to bunk with so many strange men." I took the canvas roll from him and hugged it. It felt a bit silly, but I loved my tent and wanted to show the new one my gratitude. I gave it a kiss as well. Terran thought that was funny. His booming laugh made me think of dynamite exploding a mountainside. I sent him and Boreas to join the others in getting settled in. Boreas set up the men's tent first and then joined the company. I remained alone and cried, letting the tears splatter on the ground, thinking totally of Glenn. If any of you wonderful sprites can hear me, tell Glenn I love him. Tell him I'm coming for him, and to pray. I thought of every meal we had ever shared. He had always said a prayer, even when it was just something quick on the run. He never forgot to say thank you. Praying fervently myself, I begged for courage, strength, and revenge. I'd heard that vengeance was God's, but I was officially volunteering to be his right arm and deal with it personally. I had been a churchgoer in my early years, but that was just a ruse, so that no one would suspect the satanic loyalties of my bloodline. I'd gone straight afterward to that horrible school so they could wash away the love and acceptance I'd always found in the house of the Creator. God, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm here on this quest you've put in place for me. They've taken Glenn. I need your help. Please help me get him back safely and comfort him through this ordeal. And God, give me the strength to kill them all and show them no mercy. Amen. I looked toward the Central Lands, glaring. If you enjoyed this chapter, please give it a like and/or a comment. And if you think someone else might enjoy the story, please share with them the first chapter. If you subscribe and turn the notification bell on, you'll be the first to know when the new chapter is released.